Spider-Man 2 is one of the best-selling games of 2023, and it set a number of sales records for Sony. The game sold almost 2.5 million copies in its first 24 hours, and it reportedly broke 5 million copies sold in just 11 days, which is insane for a game that's only been released for one console. Now, according to Sony, Spider-Man 2 is their fastest-selling PlayStation exclusive of all time, snatching the record from 2022's God of War Ragnarok and solidifying itself as one of the main reasons to own a PlayStation 5. Well, in September of 2021, a cinematic trailer for Marvel's Wolverine has released, but ever since then, we've been kind of left in the dark. A number of inside reports have come out claiming that the game is going to feature a M rating thanks to the graphic violence and bloody combat. It would not be an open world and instead be more open linear like the reboot God of War duology, and that Insomniac was shooting for a late 2024 release window. However, some new leaks just came out recently about Insomniac's next single player project, and they may not actually be what you wanted to hear. So take all of this with a grain of salt, because obviously nothing has been confirmed by Insomniac or Sony. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about all of this new Wolverine information. Drop a like on the video and let's get started. So a recent piece of information that came out about Insomniac's Wolverine that you may or may not have heard of is the reports of the game being out next year may not actually be correct. Wolverine was revealed at the same time as Spider-Man 2, and it was confirmed in September that Spider-Man 2's development team moved on to Wolverine to make sure work was moving quickly as possible. And according to insiders, Wolverine wasn't going to need nearly as much time in the oven as Spider-Man did, because it's not going to be an open world game. Instead, Wolverine will be closer to 2018's God of War game, or perhaps something like Dark Souls 2, where the levels are linear enough to keep you moving forward, but at a good pace, but there's still enough wiggle room for you to explore, hunt for secrets, and find alternative paths. Obviously, something like this isn't going to be as time consuming for Insomniac games as something like Spider-Man 2 did, and up to this point, we've been under the impression that Wolverine was going to launch in late 2024. However, according to a new report by Insider Gaming, a very trustworthy source, this may not actually be the case anymore. Insider Gaming reports that the upcoming Wolverine game will indeed feature a darker and more violent tone than what we've come to expect from Insomniac, but it is no longer going to be launching in 2024, and now it's going to be targeting the 2025 release window. Now, this is pretty disappointing news because a lot of PlayStation 5 owners have been itching to get their hands on this game, and when it comes to first-party content, 2024 is shaping up to be a pretty dry year for PlayStation. So if Wolverine is going to be pushed back a year, it may indeed be a very slow 12 months for Sony fans. And it also should be said that Insomniac hasn't confirmed anything just yet about Wolverine's release window, but this report comes from a very reputable source, and at this point, we're inclined to believe them. The report didn't give a reason for this delay, but if we had to guess, it was probably something to do with the amount of bugs in Spider-Man 2, or to put it simply, they just wanted to polish Spider-Man 2 as much as possible. While Spider-Man 2 was critically acclaimed at release, it's no secret that there was some glitches and some performance issues which could be considered game-breaking, and honestly, I'm kind of shocked why some of those critics were willing to look the other way on some of those issues, because while it certainly wasn't the buggiest game of the year, it still had a ton of issues that were very out of character for Insomniac games. Typically, this studio is very meticulous with their development time, but Spider-Man 2 had way more problems than we usually get from them, and the going theory is that Sony pushed Insomniac to get the game out by the end of 2024 so they could get a big AAA exclusive out of the way before the holidays. Because, as I'm sure you know, 2023 was a very dry year for first-party PlayStation 5 games. No matter how much you love Spider-Man 2, there's no denying that it came out of the oven a little bit too early, and that's entirely possible that Wolverine has been pushed back for an additional polish so Insomniac Games doesn't find themselves in that situation again. It's also entirely possible that Sony knew the public's love for Spider-Man would result in them overlooking a lot of the technical issues, but when it comes to Wolverine, they probably won't get the same benefit of the doubt, especially if people remember Spidey's unfortunate buggy launch. Like I said, there wasn't a ton of bugs, but there were some bugs present, and I don't think that they should get a pass. We all criticized Starfield for that situation, so I think Marvel's Spider-Man 2 should get that same criticism. Ultimately, I think it's good that the game is being pushed back because that means it'll launch in a more polished state, and honestly, I think most gamers agree with Miyamoto's sentiment that a delayed game is eventually good and a rushed game is always bad. But still, the bugginess of Spider-Man 2 is likely the reason Wolverine has been pushed back into 2025, which means that Sony will really need to get some kind of big first-party game to come out next year, and up to this point, it seems like all of their eggs were in the Wolverine basket, so they might have to correct course, which I'm guessing that's what they're doing. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm glad Insomniac is getting the time they need to deliver a polished product, but it definitely stings a little bit that PS5 owners are potentially looking at another year of slow first-party games content, so hopefully Sony gets their act together. Now, this video is not all bad news though, because according to this report, it also contains some long-awaited story information. So the report included the delay to 2025, but it also said that Wolverine will also be set in Madripoor, a Southeast Asian city that some of you Marvel fans might recognize. Madripoor is the haven for pirates and is a frequent home for power struggles between criminals, smugglers, and warlords. So frankly, this is is the perfect place to set a standalone Wolverine game in my opinion. Wolverine is going to take place in the same universe as Spider-Man games from Insomniac, for the simple fact that it's Insomniac and all of the games are interconnected, but it's likely not going to cross over with the story in any way, as the team has made it very clear that they want this new game to stand on its own. But the game reportedly has a setting that already has a reputation within the Marvel universe, so surely Insomniac is going to be putting their own spin on things and giving it their own backstory. And like I mentioned before, this seems like a great place to set a God of War style action game, because it will give you plenty of room to explore and hunt treasures while still keeping things linear and focused to keep it from getting boring, because the last thing that we need from a Wolverine game is boredom. Some fans of Insomniac's universe have questioned whether or not Spider-Man is going to play some kind of role in the upcoming Wolverine game, and while I don't think Spidey himself is actually going to appear, I'm sure that there will at least be a few Easter eggs. Spidey is basically locked in New York, and if the rumors are true that this game is going to be set in Madripoor, I don't think Insomniac is going to go through the effort to try to come up with a reason for Spider-Man to also be there for just a brief cameo. That being said, I'm absolutely expecting there to be some kind of dialogue lines about Spider-Man being thrown into the background, or maybe there will be some newspapers and magazines around the map that mention Spider-Man is in New York. Maybe it will be like Batman Arkham Knight, where certain thugs around the map start to make vague references of Superman and Metropolis, even though the game had nothing to do with those parts of the DC universe. Surely Insomniac is going to find a way to put references to Spider-Man and Wolverine, because let's be real, Wolverine's game simply wouldn't exist if not for the good work that they did on Spider-Man games, and surely Insomniac is going to hide little references to the wall crawler here and there. But ultimately, if you're going into Wolverine with the expectation of it being some kind of Spider-Man follow-up game, you're going to be very disappointed. That's just not the story that Insomniac is trying to make, and they've made it pretty clear with what little official statements that they've made. Now, speaking of Spider-Man, what is going on with Spider-Man 3? Is Wolverine just delayed to 2025? Spider-Man 2 dropped in October of 2023, and there was tons of teasers for the next game sprinkled around the story and side missions. We know a third Spider-Man game is in development, as Insomniac has confirmed as such. But what if Wolverine has been pushed back? Does that mean that Spider-Man 3 was also pushed back? I think it's safe to assume that Spider-Man 3 hasn't entered full production. Heck, it's probably just barely in pre-production. Perhaps the story team is working on the plot and the characters, while the main developers are working on getting Wolverine out the door as soon as possible. We also have to remember that Insomniac are also working on both Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man and Wolverine at the same time, basically. So it's safe to assume that they're working on more than one game right now. We know Wolverine is in full production, but what else? Insomniac reportedly has some other projects in the works, including a multiplayer focused game, and they don't want to stretch themselves too thin. So I'm guessing Spider-Man 3 isn't going to be entering full production until after Wolverine is nearing the finish line. Similar to how Wolverine is currently being worked on the B team until September 2023, when the Spider-Man 2 team was moved on to support that game. But if Wolverine has been pushed back, it seems safe to assume that Spider-Man 3 is also going to be pushed back as well. I think the gap between the two games will be roughly 3 to 4 years. So if Wolverine comes out in 2025, we probably won't see Spider-Man 3 until 2028, maybe even 2029, which could actually result in it being a cross-gen game on the PS5 and PS6. Maybe it'll just be the PS5 Pro, but according to multiple inside sources and reports, they have claimed that PS6 is going to hit store shelves around 2028, so Sony may want to hold on to Spider-Man 3 until then and use it as a system seller for their new console, which I guess really wouldn't be a bad idea since the franchise has been such a raging success at this point. But no matter what, Spider-Man 3 is still years away, and the longer that Wolverine takes to be completed, the longer we're going to have to be waiting for the next Spidey game. But what do you guys think about all this news? Do you believe the reports that Wolverine is going to be pushed back to 2025? And what about the story and setting? Do you think that that's a good idea for a Wolverine game? Do you think Insomniac may be headed down the wrong path with this? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel with your notifications turned on so you don't miss out on any future updates. And until next time, guys, this has been Wes, and I'll talk to you guys in the next VGL video.